In the spring of 2012, a college student named Marcus Holloway uploaded what he thought was a simple thrift store haul video to YouTube. 18 minutes of secondhand clothing, vintage books, and forgotten knickknacks filmed in his cramped studio apartment. The video earned 47 views in its first week. Most viewers clicked away after the first minute. One person watched it all the way through, twice, then a third time. And on that third viewing, they noticed something that Marcus himself had never seen, something that shouldn't have been possible. In the final 3 minutes of the footage, while Marcus held up a corduroy jacket to the camera and talked about its condition, a mannequin stood motionless in the background near his closet door. White, featureless, the kind you'd find in any department store window. Marcus had bought it as a joke, planning to dress it in his thrift finds for future videos, but the viewer, a woman named Sarah Pruitt from Portland, noticed that between timestamp 1514 and 1541, the mannequin's head had turned. Not dramatically, not obviously, just a slow, subtle rotation from facing the wall to facing the camera, facing Marcus's back. Sarah left a comment with the timestamps. Marcus dismissed it as a joke, but 3 other viewers confirmed it. Frame-by-frame analysis revealed the impossible movement. Marcus insisted he'd been alone during filming. The apartment door had been locked, no roommates, no visitors, and Marcus himself swore, on every interview he gave afterward, that the mannequin had never moved while he was in that room. Not once, not ever. The video went viral. 2 million views in a month. Then it vanished. Deleted by Marcus, without explanation. But copies had already spread across the internet, dissected by paranormal investigators and skeptics alike. Some claimed it was an elaborate hoax. Others pointed to details that seemed impossible to fake. And Marcus? He stopped making videos entirely, moved out of that apartment within 2 weeks. And when journalists finally tracked him down in 2014, he would only say one thing about what happened after he watched the footage for himself. I should have thrown it away the moment I bought it. This is the story of a thrift store purchase that became an internet legend, a story about what we bring into our homes without knowing their history, and about the moment when something ordinary reveals itself to be anything but. If you're fascinated by mysteries that blur the line between the explainable and the impossible, consider subscribing. We dive deep into stories like this every week. Marcus Holloway was 23 years old in 2012, a junior at Portland State University studying graphic design. Like many students his age, he supplemented his income through side projects, freelance logo work, the occasional commissioned illustration. But his real passion was YouTube. The platform was still young enough that anyone could carve out a niche with consistency and personality. Marcus had been uploading videos for 8 months, mostly speed painting tutorials and design process breakdowns. His channel had 217 subscribers. In March of that year, Marcus discovered thrift store haul videos. The format was simple. Buy secondhand items, film yourself showing them off, discuss their quality and value. It was a growing genre, particularly among fashion and vintage enthusiasts. Marcus saw potential. Portland had no shortage of thrift stores, and his eye for design meant he could spot interesting pieces that others might overlook. He pitched the idea to his small audience. The response was lukewarm, but encouraging enough to try. His first thrift haul took him to Second Chance Finds, a locally owned shop on Southeast Division Street. The store occupied a converted warehouse space with exposed brick walls and mismatched shelving units, packed with donated merchandise. He spent $43 on an assortment of items, a wool pea coat with intact buttons, 2 hardcover books on mid-century furniture design, a ceramic ashtray shaped like a reclining cat, and 3 dress shirts that needed minor alterations. He also spotted something unusual near the back of the store, partially hidden behind a rack of discarded curtains. A full-size mannequin, white fiberglass, androgynous, featureless face, the kind used in retail displays for decades. The mannequin had a $10 price tag zip-tied to its wrist. Marcus had no practical use for it, but it appealed to his sense of humor. He imagined dressing it in his thrift finds for thumbnail images, creating a visual through line for future videos. The absurdity of it, a life-size mannequin in a tiny apartment, felt like the kind of quirky branding decision that could set his channel apart. He asked an employee to help him load it into his decade-old Honda Civic. The back seats folded down just enough to fit it diagonally. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted house in the Alphabet District. No elevator. Marcus had to carry the mannequin up 2 narrow flights of stairs, gripping it under the arms like a passed-out friend after a party. His downstairs neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Kelso, watched from her doorway with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. Not disapproval. Something closer to concern. She asked where he'd gotten it. Marcus mentioned second chance finds. Mrs. Kelso nodded slowly, said nothing else, and closed her door. Inside his apartment, Marcus positioned the mannequin near the closet in his bedroom, the only space with enough clearance. His apartment was small, just over 400 square feet, with a combined living room and kitchenette, a narrow bedroom, and a bathroom barely large enough for one person. He'd set up his filming area in the living room, a desk against one wall, a cheap green screen hanging behind it, a single softbox light clamped to a bookshelf. Professional enough for YouTube in 2012, he filmed the haul video that same evening, 18 minutes of unscripted content. Marcus held up each item, discussed its condition, speculated on its original era and purpose. The mannequin stood in the background, visible through the bedroom doorway in several shots. Marcus made a joke about it around the 7-minute mark, said he'd name it Douglas, and turn it into the channel's unofficial mascot. The apartment was silent except for his voice. No roommates, no pets. The windows were closed against the March rain. He uploaded the video at 11:47 p.m., chose a thumbnail, wrote a brief description, added tags. Then he went to bed, the mannequin standing motionless in the dark bedroom 6 feet from where he slept. At that moment, Marcus Holloway had no reason to believe he'd documented anything unusual. No reason to think that within 72 hours he'd be watching his own footage with a growing sense of dread that would fundamentally alter how he understood the objects we invite into our lives. Sarah Pruitt found the video 3 days after it was uploaded. She was 31, working as a librarian in Portland's Pearl District, and had a habit of watching YouTube videos during her lunch breaks. Her algorithm had learned her preferences: true crime analysis, unsolved mysteries, amateur paranormal investigations. Marcus's thrift haul video appeared in her recommended feed for reasons neither YouTube nor Sarah could later explain. The thumbnail showed Marcus holding up a peacoat, nothing unusual. She clicked more out of boredom than genuine interest. The first 15 minutes were exactly what the title promised. Marcus's enthusiasm was genuine, if unremarkable. Sarah found herself half watching while eating a sandwich, her attention drifting to emails on her phone. But something made her look up during the final 3 minutes. A peripheral impression of movement. She rewound the video 10 seconds. Watched again. The mannequin was visible in the background, partially obscured by the bedroom doorframe. Marcus was holding the corduroy jacket, discussing its vintage appeal. Sarah couldn't pinpoint what had caught her attention. The mannequin's position seemed different from earlier shots, but she couldn't be certain. She opened the video in a new tab, found an earlier timestamp where the mannequin was visible, around the 4-minute mark. She compared the two frames. The difference was subtle. In the earlier shot, the mannequin faced left, toward the bedroom wall. In the later shot, it faced forward. Toward the camera, toward Marcus. She dismissed it initially. Marcus had probably adjusted the mannequin between filming segments. The video had obvious cuts, moments where he'd pause to switch items or adjust his position. But then she noticed something that made her pause the video and lean closer to her computer screen. Between timestamp 15:14 and 15:41, there was no cut. Marcus spoke continuously. The camera didn't move. And in that unbroken 27 seconds, the mannequin's head rotated. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just a slow, nearly imperceptible turn. Frame by frame, the rotation was undeniable. Sarah felt a cold sensation in her chest. She watched the segment 5 more times. The movement was real, or the video had been manipulated so skillfully that she couldn't detect the edit. But this was a small YouTube channel, 47 views. Why would someone invest that kind of technical effort for such minimal exposure? She left a comment. Anyone else notice the mannequin move at 15:14? I've watched this 10 times, and I can't explain it. Then she returned to work, unsettled in a way she couldn't articulate. By the time her shift ended 6 hours later, her comment had 3 replies. 2 other users confirmed the movement. One dismissed it as a compression artifact, but a user named TechAnalysis47 had posted a more detailed response. They'd downloaded the video and examined it frame by frame using video editing software. Their conclusion: no detectable cuts, no obvious manipulation. If it was a hoax, it was executed with unusual sophistication. That evening, Sarah sent Marcus a direct message through YouTube. She kept it factual, non-accusatory, mentioned the timestamps, asked if he'd noticed the movement during editing. Marcus responded within an hour. His reply was brief and defensive. I was alone during filming. The mannequin didn't move. Must be a playback glitch on your end. But his response felt hollow, even through text. Sarah could sense the uncertainty beneath his words. She wasn't the only one reaching out. By the next morning, Marcus's video had jumped from 47 views to over 2,000. Comments flooded in, most pointing to the same 27-second segment. Someone created a looped GIF of the movement, posted it to Reddit's paranormal forum. The post gained traction. Skeptics and believers argued in the comments. Marcus's channel gained 300 new subscribers in 24 hours, and Marcus himself stopped responding to messages entirely. What Sarah didn't know, what none of the viewers knew, was that Marcus had watched the footage himself immediately after receiving her initial comment. He'd sat in his apartment with his laptop, the mannequin still standing near his closet, and watched those 27 seconds over and over. And when he finally stood up and turned around, the mannequin was facing him. Second Chance Finds had been operating since 1989, occupying a former textile warehouse converted into retail space. The building itself dated back to 1954, with exposed beam ceilings and concrete floors that still bore faint paint stains from its industrial past. Donations arrived daily, boxes of clothing, furniture, household items, all sorted by a rotating staff of employees and volunteers. Most items had unremarkable histories. Some didn't. Marcus returned to Second Chance Finds 4 days after uploading the video. He told himself it was curiosity, not fear. The video had reached 15,000 views. The comment section had become a battleground between skeptics demanding proof of manipulation and believers insisting the footage was genuine. Marcus had tried to explain away the movement. Camera shake, compression artifacts, coincidental shadows. But he'd watched those 27 seconds too many times to believe his own explanations. The mannequin had moved. He just didn't know how. He found the same employee who'd helped him load the mannequin into his car, a woman in her 40s named Patricia, with short gray hair and a name tag that identified her as store manager. Marcus approached carefully, not wanting to sound unhinged. He asked about the mannequin's origin. Where had it come from? Who had donated it? Patricia's expression shifted from helpful to guarded. She mentioned that most donations arrived with minimal documentation. People dropped items at the back entrance, often without explanation. But she remembered the mannequin, specifically because it had arrived alone, not part of a larger donation, just the mannequin. Left leaning against the loading dock door one morning before the store opened. No note, no donor information. The staff had almost refused it. Mannequins weren't common donations and took up valuable floor space, but it was in good condition and priced to move quickly. Marcus asked when it had been donated. Patricia checked the inventory system. March the 2nd, 8 days before Marcus bought it. Patricia asked why Marcus wanted to know. Marcus hesitated, then showed her the video on his phone. He explained about the movement, the viral attention, the comments from viewers who'd analyzed it frame by frame. Patricia watched the 27-second segment 3 times. Her face remained carefully neutral. Then Patricia said something that Marcus would remember for years afterward. "You should talk to Mrs. Kelso." When Marcus asked what she meant, Patricia explained that Mrs. Kelso, Marcus's downstairs neighbor, had volunteered at Second Chance Finds for nearly a decade. She still came in occasionally and had an encyclopedic knowledge of unusual donations. More importantly, she'd been the one who'd advocated for accepting the mannequin despite staff hesitation. She'd said it would find the right buyer. Patricia found that phrasing odd at the time, but hadn't questioned it. Marcus drove back to his apartment with a growing sense of unease. Mrs. Kelso had watched him carry the mannequin upstairs, had asked where he'd gotten it. Her expression that day hadn't been concern. It had been recognition. He parked outside his building and sat in his car for 10 minutes, trying to rationalize what he was feeling. The video had an explanation. Mannequins didn't move on their own. Mrs. Kelso's interest was coincidental, but his rational mind couldn't override the instinct that something was deeply wrong. He entered the building and stood outside Mrs. Kelso's door. He could hear a television playing inside, the muffled sound of a game show. He knocked. Footsteps approached. The door opened partway, and Mrs. Kelso appeared, her expression shifting from pleasant to wary the moment she recognized him. Before Marcus could speak, she said, "You watched the video." It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded. Mrs. Kelso glanced past him toward the stairwell, as if checking they were alone. Then she stepped back and opened the door wider. "You'd better come in," she said, "and you'd better be ready to hear something you won't want to believe." Marcus hesitated on the threshold. Somewhere above him, in his apartment, the mannequin stood in the same position he'd left it, facing the door. Mrs. Kelso's apartment was a mirror image of Marcus's layout, but transformed by decades of habitation. Bookshelves lined every wall, packed with paperbacks and photo albums. A collection of ceramic figurines crowded a corner cabinet. The air smelled like lavender and old paper. She gestured for Marcus to sit at a small kitchen table while she prepared tea, an automatic ritual that seemed to help her gather her thoughts. When she finally sat across from him, she began with a question. "Did you research the mannequin before you bought it?" Marcus admitted he hadn't. It was just a mannequin. $10, a prop for videos. Mrs. Kelso nodded, as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. Then she asked if he'd noticed anything unusual before filming the video. Strange sounds in his apartment. Objects moved, a feeling of being watched. Marcus thought carefully. His apartment had always been quiet, but there had been one thing. 2 nights after bringing the mannequin home, he'd woken at 3 a.m. with the inexplicable certainty that someone was standing in his bedroom doorway. He'd turned on the light. Nothing but the mannequin. He'd dismissed it as a half-dream. Mrs. Kelso listened without interrupting. When he finished, she stood and retrieved a photo album from one of her shelves. She opened it to a page marked with a ribbon and turned it toward Marcus. The photograph was old, colors faded to yellow and orange tones, late 1970s based on the clothing and hairstyles. It showed the interior of a department store. Marcus recognized the space immediately, the building that now housed a vintage furniture shop on NW 23rd Avenue. In the photograph, 3 mannequins stood in a window display, wearing autumn fashion. The central mannequin was identical to the one in Marcus's apartment. Mrs. Kelso explained that she'd worked at that department store, Landis and Company, from 1976 to 1983. The store had used the same set of mannequins for years, rotating them through window displays and floor arrangements. In the fall of 1981, one of the mannequins, the one in the center of the photograph, began exhibiting problems. Not mechanical problems, behavioral ones. Employees reported finding it in different positions from where they'd left it. Minor changes at first. An arm angled differently. Head turned. easy to blame on forgetful staff. But the incidents escalated. A night security guard quit without explanation after working a shift alone. 2 employees refused to work closing shifts if it meant being in the building with that particular mannequin. Mrs. Kelso herself had experienced something during an inventory count one evening. She'd been in the stockroom when she heard footsteps in the showroom, the distinct clack of hard shoes on linoleum. She'd called out, thinking another employee had stayed late. No response. She'd walked to the showroom and found it empty except for the mannequins, including the one that had definitely been facing away from the stockroom door when she'd entered. It was now facing toward her. The store manager had dismissed the complaints as pranks and superstition. But when a customer's child started crying and refused to approach the mannequin, pointing at it and saying, "It looked at me," the decision was made to remove it from the sales floor. It was placed in storage. Then, when Landis & Company closed in 1987 during a commercial real estate collapse, the contents were liquidated. Most mannequins went to other retailers. That one was supposed to be destroyed. Mrs. Kelso had personally watched it being loaded into a truck headed for a disposal facility. Marcus asked the obvious question: how did it end up at Second Chance Finds 25 years later? Mrs. Kelso had no answer. She'd been as surprised as anyone when she'd seen it among the donations in 2012. She'd recognized it immediately. The specific molding, the proportions, even a small repair mark on the left shoulder. She'd wanted to refuse the donation, but couldn't explain why to her coworkers without sounding irrational. So she'd accepted it and hoped it would sit in the back unsold. Then Marcus had bought it. Marcus left Mrs. Kelso's apartment with more questions than answers. The story felt simultaneously impossible and undeniable. He wanted to dismiss it as coincidence or misidentification, but Mrs. Kelso's certainty and the photograph made that difficult. He returned to his apartment and stood in the doorway, looking at the mannequin. It hadn't moved. Of course it hadn't moved. It was fiberglass and metal armature. Objects didn't move on their own, but the video existed. Thousands of people had watched the same 27 seconds he had, and Mrs. Kelso's account matched experiences reported by people who'd never met her or heard her story. Marcus made a decision. He would document everything. If the mannequin was genuinely anomalous, and he still didn't truly believe it was, then proper documentation might provide answers. And if it was all explainable, then documentation would prove that too. He set up his camera on a tripod facing the mannequin and began recording continuously. 6-hour blocks while he was out of the apartment. Overnight recordings while he slept. He invested in a higher quality camera with better resolution and a timestamp overlay. 4 days of footage showed nothing. The mannequin remained motionless. Marcus began to feel foolish. The viral video must have been a technical glitch after all, a compression artifact or encoding error that created the illusion of movement. On the 5th night, Marcus reviewed the overnight footage from the previous evening. 7 hours and 43 minutes of a static shot. He fast-forwarded through it at 8 times speed, watching for any change. At 3:17 a.m., the mannequin's head turned. Not smoothly, the 8 times speed made it look jerky and sudden, but the movement was undeniable. Marcus's stomach dropped. He rewatched the segment at normal speed. Over the course of 4 minutes, the mannequin's head rotated approximately 30 degrees from facing the wall to facing the camera. No visible mechanism. No explanation. Marcus uploaded the footage to a private YouTube video and shared it with Sarah Pruitt, who'd continued messaging him with updates from her own research. She'd been in contact with paranormal investigation groups and video forensics experts. Everyone agreed the original video showed genuine movement, but no one could explain how. The new footage would provide additional data points. Sarah watched it immediately. Her response came within an hour. "This is going to sound extreme, but you need to get rid of it. Now, not donated. Destroyed." Marcus understood her concern, but felt paralyzed by curiosity. The mannequin wasn't aggressive. It moved when unobserved, but it hadn't done anything threatening. He wanted to understand it before making any decisions. That rationalization lasted another 3 days. On the 8th night of documented recording, Marcus woke to a sound he couldn't initially identify. A scraping noise, subtle, coming from his bedroom. He lay motionless, listening. The sound stopped. He turned on his bedside lamp. The mannequin stood in the bedroom doorway. He was certain, absolutely certain, that he'd left it positioned near the closet, 8 feet from the doorway. Now it stood at the threshold between his bedroom and living room, facing his bed. Marcus didn't move. He counted his heartbeats. 17, 23, 31. The mannequin remained motionless. Finally, Marcus stood, walked past it without looking directly at it, and spent the rest of the night in his car in the building's parking lot. The next morning, he called Mrs. Kelso. He explained what had happened and asked for help. She gave him the name of a man who might have answers. Robert Tallman, a former employee of the disposal facility where the mannequin was supposed to have been destroyed in 1987. He'd retired to Eugene, but still kept records from his decades of work. Mrs. Kelso warned Marcus that Tallman's story might be worse than not knowing. Marcus said he needed to know anyway. She gave him the phone number. Marcus made the call that afternoon. Robert Tallman answered on the 4th ring. His voice was hoarse with age, but sharp with clarity. Marcus explained who he was and why he was calling. The mannequin, the movement, Mrs. Kelso's reference. Tallman was silent for a long moment. Then he asked Marcus if he was calling from his apartment. Marcus said no, he was in his car outside the building. Tallman said that was good, wise. Then he told Marcus what he knew. In 1987, Tallman's disposal facility had received a shipment from the liquidation of Landis and Company, furniture, fixtures, signage, mannequins, standard commercial waste. The mannequins were scheduled for incineration. Fiberglass burned well, and the metal components could be salvaged. But one mannequin never made it to the incinerator. An employee named David Marsh had taken it home. Tallman only learned about this because Marsh's widow had called the facility 6 months later, asking what to do with it. Marsh had been killed in a car accident. His widow was clearing out their garage. She'd found the mannequin and wanted to return it. Tallman had driven to their home personally to collect it. The widow had explained that Marsh had become obsessed with the mannequin in his final weeks. He'd positioned it in different rooms of their house, talked to it, insisted it was listening. She thought he was having a breakdown. The night before his accident, he'd told her something she'd never forgotten. It's not the mannequin moving. It's us forgetting where it was. The next day, driving to work, Marsh had swerved off the road. No mechanical failure. No evidence of another vehicle. The investigating officer ruled it distracted driving. Tallman had taken the mannequin back to the facility, intending to destroy it immediately, but he'd made the mistake of storing it overnight in his office. The next morning, it had been repositioned. His chair was pushed away from his desk, as if someone had been sitting there. And on his desk calendar, someone had circled a date, 3 weeks in the future. The date matched nothing significant in Tallman's life. But 3 weeks later, his facility was investigated for regulatory violations. The inspection was random, but Tallman couldn't shake the feeling that the mannequin had known. He'd destroyed it that day. Full incineration. Watched it burn personally. The smell had been terrible. Not just burning fiberglass, but something organic underneath, though that should have been impossible. He disposed of the metal armature separately, filed the paperwork, closed the incident. But 6 months ago, late 2011, he'd gotten a call from a former employee who'd moved to Portland. The employee had seen the mannequin at Second Chance Finds. Same repair mark on the shoulder, same proportions, same presence. Tallman had driven to Portland himself to verify. The employee was right. It was impossible, but it was there. Marcus asked the question he already knew the answer to. What should he do? Tallman's response was immediate. You can't keep it. You can't donate it. You can't sell it. It will always come back to someone. You have to destroy it, and you have to do it right. He gave Marcus specific instructions. Dismemberment first. separate the head, limbs, and torso. Then, incineration at high temperature, minimum 1400 degrees. Scatter the metal components in separate locations. Don't keep any piece. Don't take photographs. Don't look back. Marcus followed those instructions 2 days later. A friend with a workshop helped with the dismemberment. An industrial waste facility handled the incineration. Marcus never told them what they were burning. The process took 6 hours. When it was finished, Marcus drove to 3 separate recycling centers and disposed of the metal armature in different locations across Portland. He deleted the original video from YouTube and every copy he could find on other platforms. Some copies survived, reposted by channels he couldn't identify or contact. The video still circulates today, analyzed and debated. Marcus never made another YouTube video. He moved to Seattle in 2013 and changed careers. Nothing that required filming, nothing that involved secondhand objects. When Sarah Pruitt interviewed him for a documentary project in 2018, he agreed to speak only off camera. He described what he'd learned and what he'd done. And when she asked if he believed the mannequin was truly destroyed, Marcus paused before answering. "I want to believe that," he said. "But I've seen it at 3 different thrift stores since 2012. Different cities, different conditions. And each time I walk away, because some things, once you invite them in, never really leave."